I remember the first time that someone came up to me, and I remember I was kind of fresh out of college, and I saw this person, and they were devastated. And they walk up to me, and they said, "Steve, my dog died," and they were devastated. And I did not have a dog. And so I'm trying to just get on their level. You know, last week I talked about how when people are mourning, what we want to do is we want to get in and just mourn with them and be with them. And so I'm trying to do that, but I have no way to really connect the depth of how sad they are over their dog because I don't really have one. Well, later on, when I got engaged to Lindsay, one of the things she had mentioned was she wanted a dog. Now, she lived in Ohio at the time, and so I was driving by Walmart and noticed for sale dogs. And so I flipped a Yui in the middle of the road and went and picked up a dog and got into the car. And I remember that moment when I buy this dog, and it was like a 2-for-1 deal. It was amazing, okay? I mean, Walmart parking lot is where you get dogs, okay? And so I go in there and I get this dog, and I remember I got it in the seat, and I just look at it and I go, well, what do I do now? I have a dog. And so then I had to figure out to feed it and all these things. And anyway, me and this dog really got attached. I would take that dog. I had a little doggy bed in my office at the time where the dog would lay there, and I would plan out meetings to where I'd take the dog out and he would pee, and then we'd come back in and do his thing. And me and this dog got really close. Lindsay and I got married, and that was like our dog, our first dog, which is a big moment. Because usually what happens is, now if you're a cat person, we'll pray for you. But if you like dogs, a dog is usually the natural first step before the kid thing. So you see, can I keep this dog alive? And then you graduate and go, I bet I could keep a kid alive. And so anyway, this dog, we love this dog. Well, we were out of town. I was a youth pastor, and we took a ton of these kids to this concert. And I remember I let my parents watch the dog, and they were watching the dog, and it was Sunday the next day, and so obviously church and all of that. And so they were going to return the dog on their way to church and drop the dog off at our house. Well, Sunday morning, I get a call from my mom, and she's just crying. And I'm like, oh, man, what happened? I go, hey, Mom, what's going on? And we couldn't tell you while you were gone, but your dog is dead. And I'm like, what happened? It's pretty plug and play. You leash them up, you feed them, yeah. And anyway, our dog had seen this bird. Now, our dog was just really spastic. If it saw a bird, it went after it. Okay, so you always had to keep the thing on a leash because it would just jet. And it saw this bird, and I think the bird staged this. The bird was in the middle of the street, and they lived kind of out in the country. And this bird, I'm just imagining the bird kind of stuck its tongue out our dog, and our dog was like, okay, it's on. And then it took off, and it broke the leash and went out on the road, and a cement truck came, and the bird took off, and our dog did not. And so our dog met Jesus really quickly. I remember going to church with sunglasses on. And we were just we were devastated. And it was just the worst thing in the world. And what it reminds me of is sometimes someone will go through some pain, and we try and relate, we try and get in there with them, but we just can't really relate at the level, at the depth that we feel like they need. And then something happens to us. The same thing happens to us. My marriage crumbles. I lose my job. Something happens with my kids. And then all of a sudden, it's me in the picture, and I go, I'm devastated, and I go, how do I respond, and how do I react in this? I know what I should do for someone else, but what happens when it happens to me? And so tonight, the question that we're wrestling with and that we're going to talk through is, what happens when it's my pain? What happens when I'm the one wounded? And so we talked the very first Sunday that we launched into this series on pain. I talked about the actual physical benefits of pain, how it's a warning system in our bodies that let us know that something's wrong with our body. And we need to take notice of that when we feel pain. And so we talked about that. And but what happens when something happens to me and it catches me off guard? I don't know about you, but immediately I have this cycle where for whatever reason I think it's God's fault. So immediately when something happens to me, I go, and then I just kind of go down the list after that. Like it's just totally human nature for me. The other night, if you look really closely, I have a bump on my head. The other night, I put my, I don't know which child it was. I think it was Kingston. I go to put Kingston down for bed. Now, how many of you, when it's like dark out in your house, you know your house well, right? So you can walk around. Like someone else will be hitting stuff, but you're like, this is my house. I know where that is. I know where that was left. And you're like doing corners. You know where the light switches are because it's your house. You've walked it a million times. And so I'm going, I don't need to turn on the light, and it'll be better actually. Maybe, keep him asleep. He won't see a light on. And so I'm thinking I'm good. And I went to turn into our bedroom before our bedroom was there, which was the door frame. And so I just turned right into the door frame and just hit my eye. It hit my eye. I swear I heard my teeth like even shake a little bit. And I just hit it. And it was just one of those moments. And to be honest, and I'm talking about pain, my first thought was, really, God? Like literally, that's the first thing I did. And then I honestly started laughing because I'm doing this series on pain. And that's the first thing that came, because he's sovereign. He's over all. Well, he didn't build the door frame there. He didn't say, hey, Steve, take that right a little sharper this time. But that was my first response. Like, God, why would you allow my eye to hurt? Why would you do this to me? And so I naturally do that. And then my progression goes to the next thing, which is, did I do something to cause this pain? Now, in that situation, 100% yes. I took a right way too quickly, okay? And it rocked my world. There are times when it is good, when we're going through pain, to ask ourselves, is this self-inflicted pain? Because sometimes it is, right? If I neglect my marriage, there is going to be pain in my marriage. If I cheat on my spouse, there's going to be pain in my marriage. In my job, if I become lazy at my job, there is going to be a moment where there's going to be some pain in my job. If I treat my coworkers with disrespect and lie and steal and cheat at work, there's going to be pain that happens. I'll probably lose my job. If I treat my kids like garbage, at some point, they're going to hurt me. They're going to hurt me. And so there is a place and a space for me to look, because there is cause and effects in this world. And so we do need to ask ourselves, just as I made the decision to take that sharp right and hit myself, there are times when we do that. But I think we need to look at, how do I respond when it shakes me to the core of who I am, and I love Jesus and I want to try and pursue Jesus? How do I really respond? And in 2 Samuel 12, there's actually a situation where David, the guy who slayed Goliath, he's now king, and he finds out that his child's going to die. And he responds, and this is a guy that they say is a man after God's own heart, and how he responds to me just speaks volumes. It literally talks about how he just starts mourning. He lays down, face down, just crying out to God for days. He refuses to eat, and I see that, and I go, man, this guy is just devastated at losing his child. And then in Job, we touched on Job last week and his friends and what they said to him. But we know that as soon as Job heard all of that horrific news about losing his family, his wealth, all those things, he stripped himself and he shaved his head, and he just was devastated. And in Job 3:24 through 26, he says this: I cannot eat for sighing. My groans pour out like water. What I always feared has happened to me. What I dreaded has come true. I have no peace, no quietness. I have no rest. Only trouble comes. Oh, this guy is a wreck. I think sometimes we read stories in here and we talk about what's happened, and we glaze through kind of what happened to them, and we just kind of know the end of the story, like, oh, they get back up, oh, they make it. But we miss out on the moments where they're extremely vulnerable, and they let us into this reality, this truth, that when something happens to you and to me, It is not my responsibility or my job to pretend that I'm Mr. or Mrs. spiritually mature person to God. It is not my job to pretend to be this spiritual giant so that everyone can just look at me and in my moment of pain, oh, wow, look at Steve. We need to allow ourselves to grieve. And I think sometimes in the church world and what I hear sometimes from stage about this book, it's like, you just have to get through it. You just have to push through and God's got you and everything's going to work out. Just be obedient to the end and God's got this huge plan that he's operating through you. And the problem is you hear that, you want to go through with that, but you don't feel that way and it's not working. And I think we miss where he just mourns. And I just want to encourage you, when it happens in your life, to allow yourself to mourn. And if you need to be angry, allow yourself to get angry. If you have questions, allow yourself to ask questions. If you weep, and like he says, it was flowing, then just weep. But we all need to go through these emotions. It's good for us when we're doing this and responding this way. And we see that with Job and David. And Job 13:15, this little verse tucked away, he says something that is so critical as he is in the process of mourning. He says this: God might kill me, but I have no other hope. I'm going to argue my case with him. And I love it in the NAS version. It's just like, I have no other option. My hope will remain in him, even if it's death. And I love that question. What else am I going to put my hope in right now? Like, what else? Everything's gone. My world is crumbling. And I think sometimes we may not have everything removed out of our lives, but something shakes us and it feels that way. And it's in those moments that he comes to this conclusion as he's just a wreck, and he says, and he tells and he responds to his friends, listen, what else am I going to put my hope in? And I'm going to continue to plead my case to God. His hope was 100% entrenched on his relationship with God and what he knew to be true about God. And here's the thing. The greatest moment that we have, the most powerful thing that comes about in our moment of pain, that we have to come to this place with, is you have the power of choice. When the morning starts, and even after it goes, I have a choice. If the pain continues for me, if it doesn't go away, like the pain wasn't like, oh, I got it and now I'm gone, for guys like Job and this, I have the power still to choose. And it's that moment when I have the choice of how I respond that it either propels me this way or it actually repels me in the opposite way. And so it happens. Things happen to us. Every single person in this room has had things that have happened in our lives that have hurt us deeply. And maybe you're still wearing that right now. But we have a choice. And we see how Job responds. It's interesting because as we see God wants us to move forward, even in this pain, Paul talks so clearly about this. As he's got this pain, it says this thorn to his side that we talked about, I believe last week a little bit, but he's got this thing and it won't go away. And he's not like, oh, thanks God for this. But he says something that's really, really interesting about this pain that's just a part of who he is now. He says this in 2 Corinthians 12:9. Each time he said, and this is God speaking to Paul, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. So now I am glad to boast about my weaknesses so that the power of Christ can work through me. What happens is, amidst this pain, whatever it was, and he prayed and prayed and prayed for it to go away. He wasn't like, hit his head on the side and went, yay, God, thanks for the pain. Like he wasn't that. Sometimes we read that and we think, oh, he was just like, yeah, I get this. Woo! Like, no, it bothered him. He prayed and prayed like, God, remove this. Why did you give me the gift to heal all these things? And like, when it's me, I can't heal me. But then he turns this corner and he sees God specifically says, my grace is all you need. My power works best in weakness. And he sees that and he goes, I have to cling in this moment to grace. And it's all I have, but it is sufficient. It's sufficient. And then he says those powerful words that my power is perfected and works in incredible ways through my weakness. Now, I want to encourage some of you because if you're in the pain right now, sometimes you can't see that. You're not at this place sometimes where it's like, oh, good, his power gets to be perfected through my weakness. Yes. Like, no, that's not a typical normal response. But it's something that matures into our life if we can stay faithful, if we can cling to God, even in the things we can't understand, even in the things where we go, man, I feel like, God, you're picking on me. Even when you go, God, this really doesn't feel fair. But if I can just cling to this grace, this incredible grace that I didn't earn or deserve or ask for, and yet he just provided it and willfully gave it to me, if I can focus on that through this, at some point, something turns and God starts doing something. And like I said, it could be years later, but for Paul, this wasn't like a moment of like, oh, I feel good today. Yes, God, thank you for doing, like this was his life now. Out of the pain that he had experienced, he allowed it to shape, to mold him, to form him. And he says in Philippians 4:13, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. And he's not talking about, I can get that job, I can do that, I can preach this, and all these people. He is literally in a prison cell going, I can handle this, and I can go through this, because I can go through anything for Christ's sake. And he's in the midst of pain as he's saying that, as he's chained up, as he's in a prison that would make our prisons look like, oh my gosh, ridiculous. And he's there and he's able to say those words. So this wasn't just like a moment for Paul where he was just feeling really spiritual and like, oh, and God is so good. It was like, it was continuous throughout his life that the pain that he experienced was something that kept happening. And yet, more and more, he's more and more aware that as I'm weak, God keeps using me in greater ways. Now listen, that's not something, once again, that I go, hey God, could you make me really weak? Could you just like wreck my life so that I can be used by, I don't pray that. Do you pray that? No. But when it happens, what will we do? Will we cling to these words or will we cling to what other people say? Because we know what other people are saying. Oh, you got what you deserve, or you did this, or, God's mad at you, or this is what you get for believing in God, or, well, if you had listened to me, that's what other people say. Or they go, man, I'll pray for you, just stay away. But with God, it's different, and we cling to these words. And in John 16:33, Jesus says these incredible words, and these are words that I know people like Paul and people that were around in that same time frame. These were like huge words, and he says, I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows. You will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. I love this. I have told you all this so that you may have peace in me. Here on earth, you will have many trials and sorrows, but take heart because I have overcome the world. And I love this because it's not the setup that if you just obey me and walk with me, I'm just going to dump the loads of wealth and happiness on you all the time. He says, listen, you need to know right now that this is going to happen, and don't be surprised when these things do happen, because they're going to happen. And in that moment, when that happens for you, when the trial happens, when the pain happens in my life, You just need to know that it's not because, oh, I just wasn't spiritual enough, or I didn't give enough, or I didn't attend enough, or I didn't do this or that enough, or man, if I would have just done, this and all this would have worked out differently. Listen, God's love for you is not conditional about how much you give to him. God's love is unconditional because he's unconditional, because he loves you so much. And I love this because at the heart of the matter is this. He says, I have overcome the world. I have overcome your sin. I have overcome your sickness. I have overcome your marriage. I have overcome your pain. I have overcome what someone did to you. And when we see these words that Jesus says, I have overcome this world, he's not just saying, I just overcame the world. I overcame all the tragedies, all the heartaches, all the pains that I'm going to go through, that you're going to go through. Jesus says, I've overcome it all. And at some point in your healing process, you have to come back to this point and cling to these words. You can't cling to a religion or philosophy on life. You cling to the words of Jesus, where he says, I have overcome. And sometimes I just need to hear that, because I can't overcome. A verse for me that I say over and over when I'm just like, is 1 John 4:4. Greater is he that is in me than he who is in the world. I use and abuse that verse like you can't even imagine. Because there's just times where I'm like, God, I can't do this. God, I just can't do this. Or I can't go through this. Or this is too much for me. Or I don't know how to relate. Or you see, in your moment of pain, sometimes it's just good to have a verse that's like, God, you're an overcomer. You're an overcomer. Thank God I have a relationship with you, because I don't feel like I can overcome right now. And he says, that's okay. I'm with you. It's got to be real to me. And I want to close with these verses here. In James 1, 2-4, it says this. Dear brothers and sisters, when troubles come your way, consider it an opportunity for great joy. For you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. So let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, you will be perfected and complete, needing nothing. This one race that I trained for, it was a half marathon, and I was training for it. And as I trained for it, I did a ton of treadmill training for it. And part of the reason people will do treadmill training when they're doing a race is because it helps save your knees. Well, I did the race, and I did a lot of treadmill training for the race. And as I'm in the race, I don't know at what point, but all of a sudden, my joints and my body just started breaking down. And it was just like, oh my goodness, I am in like crazy pain. What is going on? And what happened is that pain revealed to me very clearly that I had done too much treadmill training. And so this pain, when it happened, it was like your joints, they're not prepared for this beating. And so what happened is I changed how I trained for the following race, and I adjusted. And what that pain taught me was, Steve, if you want to finish well and run this race well, you have to address this issue, because it's not working out. And when I read these words, and it talks about how pain actually ends up, if we can walk through it and embrace Jesus through it and the truth of who he is and his plan for me, if I'll walk through it, it will give me an endurance in this life that I would not have any other way without that pain. I would not have trained any differently for any other race the rest of my life if I wouldn't have had pain. And it's made me a more complete runner. Listen, God's design for you is not to just make it and just crawl across the finish line. He wants you to race, to sprint through, and to have both hands and start kissing the crowd. Like, it's a moment when I finish, when I stand before him, right? It's not, oh, God, did you see what I went through for you down there? Oh, whew, I made it. You proud of me, God? No, like he says, Steve, if you'll go through this and walk with me through those moments in your life when you have that pain, I'm going to create endurance with your life. And it says this endurance that brings about this perfectness where you're lacking nothing. I don't want to at the end look back. It's funny how once you have kids, you start thinking about your legacy all of a sudden, and it's just weird. It's like, well, what am I going to leave my kids? Or are my kids going to be more inspired about Jesus as a result? And it's just this weird process because when you're growing up, you never think about your kids. When you get married, you are locked into love, so you're definitely not thinking about kids. And then all of a sudden it happens and you start looking at your kids and you start going, wow, whoa, things are so much bigger now. And I look at that and I go, man, I don't want me to leave this legacy of, man, oh, I survived or I made it. No, I want them to see that when you run this and you get into this and you serve Jesus and you love Jesus with all your heart, he makes you a better daddy. He makes you a better husband. He makes you a better worker. And he takes you to a place where he gives you influence in people's lives that you've never had before. And he takes that thing, that pain, that dominated you, and all of a sudden, slowly, he starts using it. And I think that's the thing that we miss. I think we jump ship in verses, and then we jump to the next one, then we go to this one, and we name it, and then we claim it, and we miss the whole point that, no. You don't just get there in life without really getting dirty and muddy and messy and going through some pain. And that's not the yay story, but it's real. And you get a depth out of that. Your love is so much stronger because of it. You start looking more like Jesus. You start having thoughts like Paul, where you read that and you go, this guy's crazy. And then all of a sudden you're going, man, God, you're using me out of nothing. You're using this thing that was so bad, and you're using it now. And it comes out of, once again, that choice. It circles back to choice. The choice that I make in my life is either going to cause this pain, this situation to move forward or to go backwards. The power of the choice to forgive. You know, it's one of the things that's hard for me is when I meet people that are wounded, and they're wounded because something that's been done so long ago, or they have an opinion or a thought about something and they've held onto it, and they say they love Jesus. And of all the people that should be able to forgive, if you love Jesus, you should be the first in line to be able to forgive. Because of all the people, and that's what just shakes me when I look at the landscape of just people that are saying, I'm a Christian, and I see these battle lines and these beat downs that happen, and I go, whoa, time out. We got people wounded by other people that are serving the same God, that are loving the same God, and we're wounding each other and turning away from God because of other people that say they love God as well. And it's man, we're supposed to be the ones that are the light in the world. We're supposed to be the ones that show you can address conflict and see God work. You can experience healing when you forgive. And so I just want to encourage, some of you need to make that choice to forgive, whether they deserve it or not. And like I said, this should be something that marks our lives because God forgave us. Will I choose to let go? Will I choose to forgive? Will I choose to move forward in pain? Will I choose to trust God? Will I choose to cling to his word even when it doesn't make sense to me? And I'll tell you this, I'm so glad Jesus answered yes to all that. His incredible struggle. The sweating drops of blood in the garden. I can't believe I'm doing this. Oh my goodness. God, hey, is there any other way? I know we've discussed this since before we created these things, but this is hard. And he goes forward with it. And as he's going forward with it, one of his closest people who already knew would do this, but then to walk through it where wow, look who's leading the charge to end my life. One of my closest followers. And he betrays me, not with there he is, but he betrays Jesus with a kiss. And Jesus walks through this, and then he gets beaten and mangled and just crushed on our behalf. And then he's up there, and I'm sure he's sitting there going, wow, And he's in pain and all this, but then he rose again, right? He dies, but he rose again. And out of the worst pain comes the most incredible comfort. That's why we're here. That's why we're able to worship. And I'm so glad he did that. And I think when it comes to our faith, when it comes to who we are, and as I walk through and go through pain, I can either allow my life to be a tragedy or a testimony. And I think if you want tragedies, they're all over. But the question is, will I allow my life and my situation to become a testimony? And that's the thing I want you to think about, because like I said, these choices that we make when pain circles around and comes and calls my name, the choices that I'm going to make, man, they're going to have huge ramifications. And I have the opportunity to go through it and allow God to do victory that I couldn't do on my own. And those are the moments where all of a sudden these become a testimony of Steve and not a tragedy. You know, last Sunday, our worship person was Trevor Davis, and I've known Trevor Davis for a long time. And a while back, they lost their baby after the delivery. It was just something went wrong, and then all of a sudden, they lose their baby. Really, really rough, horrible situation. I remember talking with him. I remember the process after, and me and him meeting, and it wasn't just like, oh, Steve, God gets to use me as like no, he was broken, he was wounded, and all of this, and it's been something that they've walked through, and God's brought healing. It's been over time for him and his wife. They have this new little baby daughter now, and if you've seen her, she's got a ton of hair. Her and my little guy, they look like twins almost, because there's just unexplainable hair coming out of them both. And anyway, when he was leading last week, I noticed his wife left, and I'm like, oh man, I must have said something offensive. But no, I saw her. She came back in after, and I said, hey Heidi, how are you? And she goes, man, I'm really tired, but I'm really full right now spiritually. And I said, awesome. I said, what's up? What happened? You know, and she had met another lady here that had lost her child. And she just walked with her around the church and just allowed God to use their story. And she was saying how tired they were from the weekend, but she was so full right now because of the opportunities that God keeps just bringing into their paths to pour into other people's lives. And from knowing how hard that was for her to be to that point, to me was just like, this is real. Like, this is real. And my encouragement for you is, don't blame God, embrace God. And it's going to be hard. And these wounds and these pasts that we have and the things that come into our lives, they're very difficult. But mourn and embrace God. Embrace him. Because there's going to be so many thoughts, there's going to be so many things that are going to try and come in and take away from you and God in that moment. And I'm telling you, just like Job said, I don't know where else I can put my hope, but I have to put my hope in Jesus. And so tonight, I just want to encourage you. I don't know your situation, your story, but whatever you're going through, whatever's hard, and it's you. It's not someone else. This is about you and God. I want to encourage you to quit trying to figure God out, to quit trying to go after all these answers, and just take a moment and do this with God. Just embrace him. Let me pray. God, I thank you for the moments of vulnerability that are written in this book, your words, where there's these people that I admire, these heroes of our faith. And we get moments of vulnerability when they walk through pain. These moments where they question everything they know about themselves in this pain. And yet, God, it is also through those moments that you do incredible stories and testimonies and take these individuals and use them. And Father, I want to run from pain. I don't want it to be a part of my story. I don't want it to be a part of my kids' story. But God, I just pray that when it comes knocking on my door, that I would remember who you are. That I would remember that there's words that you say about how much you love me. How your grace is sufficient for me. And how your power is going to, in some crazy way, be perfected through my weakness. And so, God, I pray that you would just change my perception and my mindset of pain and allow you to work even in it and through it. And God, I pray that just people in this room would have incredible testimonies and not more tragedies. And that they would just walk the story that you are writing, every single one of us, and embrace you through it, Lord. In Jesus' name, amen.